The air in the emergency room at Metropolitan General was a toxic soup of antiseptic, stale coffee, and fear. It was a constant, high-pitched whine of beeping monitors, the squeak of rubber soles on polished linoleum, and the clipped, urgent shouts of people who held life and death in their hands every single day. For most, it was a calling. For Nurse Anna Hayes, it was a hiding place, a place to be small, a place to be invisible. She moved through the chaos like a ghost, her shoulders hunched, her eyes perpetually fixed on the floor. Her uniform always seemed a size too big, her light brown hair always pulled back in a bun that was functional, but never neat. She was the nurse assigned to restocking the supply closets, changing the bedding in empty bays, and cleaning up the messes no one else wanted to touch. She was forgettable. She was meant to be. A gurney clattered past, pushed by two panting paramedics. "Unresponsive male, late 40s, GCS of 5, one of them yelled. Anna instinctively flattened herself against the wall, making herself smaller, letting the frantic current of the ER flow around her. She was an island of quiet subservience in an ocean of controlled panic. "Hayes!" A sharp voice cut through the air. Anna flinched. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Dr. Marcus Thorne, Chief of Emergency Medicine. He stood like a Roman emperor surveying his domain, his expensive tailored scrubs unwrinkled, his silver-streaked hair perfectly coiffed. He had the kind of cruel, handsome face that belonged on a magazine cover, and he knew it. "Did you or did you not restock Trauma Bay 3? He asked, his voice dripping with condescending patience. Anna's eyes darted toward the bay in question. "I did, Dr. Thorne, just this morning." Her voice was a mouse-like whisper, easily swallowed by the din. "Then perhaps you can explain," he said, striding over and pointing a manicured finger at a shelf, "why the 7.5 endotracheal tubes are not where they are supposed to be." Anna's heart sank. She had restocked it. She knew she had. She had a system, a quiet, meticulous method for everything she did. It was the only thing that kept her mind from wandering to places it shouldn't go. I'm sure I put them there, sir." Dr. Thorne let out a short, incredulous laugh. Several other nurses and a junior resident, Mark, snickered along with him. They orbited Thorne like sycophantic moons. "You're sure?" "Nurse Hayes is sure," he announced to his audience. "This, from the woman who managed to spill a sterile irrigation tray all over my $2,000 shoes last week." The memory brought a hot flush of shame to Anna's cheeks. She had been startled by a loud bang from a backfiring truck outside and had simply lost her grip. Thorne had screamed at her for 10 solid minutes. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you, nurse," Thorne commanded. Anna forced her gaze upward, her eyes meeting his for a fraction of a second before skittering away. His eyes were the color of a winter sky, cold and unforgiving. "I need competence in my ER, Hayes. I need speed. I need precision," he said, his voice lowering to a growl. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "You have none of those things. You move like you're wading through mud. You hesitate. You are a liability." He leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper only she could hear. "Frankly, I don't know how you ever passed your nursing exams. My guess is you cried your way through them." He took a step back, his performance for the staff resuming. "Now, find the damn tubes and fix your mistake, and try not to trip over your own feet while you do it." He turned and swept away, his small court of followers trailing in his wake. Anna stood frozen for a moment, the heat of her humiliation radiating from her face. She could feel the stares of her colleagues. Some were pitying, like Chloe, a young nurse who had always been kind to her. Most were dismissive. She was the department joke, the clumsy, timid nurse who was afraid of her own shadow. She took a shaky breath, the familiar burn of unshed tears behind her eyes. Just breathe. Count the tiles on the floor. 10 across, 10 down. 100 tiles. You are here. You are safe. It was a mantra she'd repeated 1,000 times. She wasn't in the dust and chaos of a faraway desert. She wasn't watching a helicopter burn against a setting sun. She was in a hospital. She was safe. With mechanical movements, she walked over to Trauma Bay 3. She looked at the shelf. The 7.5 ET tubes were right there, just behind the box of 8.0s. Someone must have shifted them. It wasn't her mistake. But she knew better than to say anything. it wouldn't matter. In Thorne's world, the fault was always hers. She quietly rearranged the boxes, her hands moving with a slow, deliberate steadiness that belied the tremor in her soul. As she finished, Chloe appeared at her side, pretending to check a monitor. "Don't let him get to you, Anna," she whispered, her voice kind. "He's a monster to everyone." "It's okay," Anna murmured, not meeting her eyes. "He was right. I should have double-checked." Chloe sighed. "No, he wasn't. You're a good nurse, Anna. You're just quiet." Anna gave a small, non-committal shrug. Quiet was safe. Quiet was anonymous. She finished her task and slipped back into the bustling hallways, seeking the comforting solitude of the linen closet. She began folding sheets, the repetitive motion a balm to her frayed nerves. Each precise fold was a small act of control in a life that had been defined by a catastrophic lack of it. She hid her left forearm under the sleeve of her scrubs, a subconscious habit. Even after all these years, the puckered, silvery lines of the old shrapnel wound sometimes felt like they were burning. It was a reminder of the person she used to be, a person she had buried deep. The day wore on in a blur of mundane tasks and casual cruelties. Thorne found several more opportunities to belittle her, once for being too slow to fetch a basin, once for not anticipating his need for a specific suture kit. Each time, she absorbed the blow with a quiet, "Yes, doctor," or "Sorry, doctor," her compliance only seeming to fuel his disdain. She was a nail that refused to be hammered down, so he just kept hitting it, enjoying the sound it made. Dr. Evans, a senior physician with weary eyes, watched one of these exchanges with a frown, but said nothing. He was a good doctor, but a man who valued his impending retirement more than confrontation. He was the coward, the man who knew better, but chose silence. Anna understood him. She had made a similar choice. Late in the afternoon, the relative lull was shattered. The automatic doors to the ambulance bay hissed open with a sense of violent urgency. "Coming in hot!" a paramedic shouted. Two medics burst through, running alongside a gurney carrying a man who was a collage of dirt, blood, and torn fabric. He was unconscious, his face obscured by grime and a nasty-looking gash on his forehead. "What do we have?" Thorne demanded, instantly taking charge.
"John Doe!"
the lead paramedic gasped, out of breath. "Found him at the base of a collapsed scaffolding at a downtown construction site. No ID, no phone. Looks like a fall from about 50 feet. He was unconscious on our arrival. Vitals are all over the place. BP is 90/60 and dropping. Pulse 130. Sats are 89 on a non-rebreather." Thorne's eyes swept over the patient with the detached air of a mechanic assessing a broken engine. "Trauma Bay 1. Let's get a look at him." Anna, who had been on her way to empty biohazard bins, found her path blocked by the sudden influx of activity. She stood near the wall, watching. Something about the scene felt wrong. The paramedics were frantic, but the patient, he was too still, even for an unconscious man. Thorne began his examination, barking orders. "Give me a full trauma panel. Type and cross for 4 units. Get portable x-ray in here for chest and pelvis. I want a fast scan, now." The team jumped into action, a whirlwind of efficient movement. Clothes were cut away, revealing a torso bruised and battered. There was a significant penetrating wound on his right side, just below the ribs, but it wasn't bleeding profusely. "Looks like a piece of rebar got him," one of the residents noted. Thorne leaned in closer, shining his penlight into the man's eyes. "Pupils are pinpoint," he announced. He sniffed the air around the man's face. "And I smell it. That sweet, chemical scent." He looked up, a smirk of cynical certainty on his face. This wasn't a 50-foot fall. He peeled back one of the man's eyelids again. Track marks on his arms. Pinpoint pupils. Respiratory depression. "Gentlemen, this isn't a trauma case. This is an overdose who got clumsy and fell off a 3-foot ladder." A murmur went through the staff. It made a certain kind of sense. They saw it all the time. "The wound?" the resident asked. "Probably stumbled onto a piece of junk on the ground. It's not the primary issue here," Thorne declared with absolute authority. "His oxygen saturation is low because of the narcotics depressing his respiratory drive. The hypotension is part of the toxidrome." Anna watched from the doorway, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. She could smell it too, but it wasn't the smell of street drugs. It was cleaner, sharper. It reminded her of something specific, a scent from a briefing on emerging chemical threats. A scent that was supposed to be followed by immediate, aggressive decontamination, and a very specific protocol. Cancel the full trauma workup, Thorne commanded. Just give him a dose of Narcan, 2 milligrams. Let's see if he wakes up. He stepped back from the gurney, already losing interest. And check his pockets for anything sharp before we move him. I don't want anyone getting stuck with a stray needle. He was dismissing the man, writing him off as just another addict, another piece of human refuse washed up on the shores of his pristine emergency room. Once the Narcan is in, move him to Observation Base 6, Thorne continued, already turning his attention to a more interesting case on the main board. Let him sleep it off. If he's stable in a few hours, we'll discharge him to a city shelter. We need this bay for actual emergencies. The team complied, though a few exchanged uncertain glances. The fall had seemed so significant. But Thorne was the chief. His word was law. A nurse administered the naloxone. They waited. The man's breathing didn't change. He didn't stir. He didn't gasp for air as overdose patients often did when reversed. Nothing happened. Stubborn one, Thorne muttered without turning around. Give him another 2 milligrams. If that doesn't work, his brain is already toast. There's nothing more for us to do. He waved a dismissive hand. Get him out of my trauma bay. The nurses and orderlies began to move the John Doe, his gurney rattling as they pushed him toward the less monitored observation area. Anna watched him go, the cold knot in her stomach now a block of ice. Thorne was wrong. She had never been more certain of anything in her life. He was profoundly, catastrophically wrong. And if she didn't do something, the man on that gurney was going to die. She tried to push the feeling down. It wasn't her place. It wasn't her patient. Intervening would be professional suicide. Thorne would not just fire her, he would destroy her career, have her license revoked. She would be cast out, her carefully constructed world of anonymity shattered. She went back to her tasks. She collected trash bags. She wiped down a counter. But her eyes kept flicking to the clock, and then to Observation Base 6 at the far end of the hall. The man was hooked up to a basic monitor, but no one was watching him. He was a problem to be discharged, not a patient to be saved. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The ER's rhythm returned to its normal, frantic pace. A child with a broken arm. An elderly woman with chest pain. The John Doe was already forgotten. But Anna couldn't forget. Her training, buried under years of intentional meekness, was screaming at her. The symptoms didn't align. Pinpoint pupils, yes. Respiratory depression, yes. But the lack of response to a massive dose of Narcan was a red flag the size of a billboard. And the hypotension, the tachycardia, it wasn't an opioid toxidrome. It was a cardiovascular collapse. The man's body wasn't shutting down from drugs. It was being attacked. She found an excuse to walk down the hall, pretending to check the stock levels in a nearby cart. She glanced into Base 6. The man lay as still as death. She looked at his monitor. SATs, 84%, and dropping. Heart rate, 145. A frantic, thready beat. Blood pressure, 80/50, circling the drain. Her eyes flicked to his chest. His breathing was shallow, yes, but it was also asymmetrical. The left side of his chest was rising and falling slightly. The right side, the side with the wound, was barely moving at all. Tracheal deviation. It was subtle, but it was there. His trachea was being pushed slightly to the left. Tension pneumothorax. The rebar wound wasn't incidental. It had created a one-way valve. With every breath, air was leaking from his lung into his chest cavity, but it couldn't get out. The pressure was building, compressing his good lung and, more critically, his heart. He wasn't overdosing. He was suffocating from the inside out. The chemical agent, whatever it was just a confounding factor, a smokescreen that Thorne's arrogance had led him to see as the primary cause. She felt a wave of adrenaline, sharp and clean. It was a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to experience in years. It was the clarity that comes when chaos erupts, and you are the only one who knows the way through. The timid, clumsy nurse was gone, burned away in an instant. In her place stood someone else. Someone with purpose. She strode toward the bay, her posture changing. Her shoulders squared. Her head came up. Her walk was no longer a shuffle, but a glide, each step economical and sure. Thorne happened to be walking down the hall, reviewing a chart. He saw her approaching the bay with an expression he'd never seen on her face before. It was a look of pure, unadulterated focus. "Hayes, what do you think you're doing?" he snapped, annoyed by her presence near his designated junkie. "I told you to leave that case alone. I need you to go down to Central Supply and—" "He's in cardiac arrest," Anna said. Her voice was not a whisper. It was clear, steady, and cut through the air like a scalpel. She wasn't looking at Thorne. She was looking at the monitor, where the man's heart rate had just flatlined into a useless electrical flutter. Before Thorne could even process her words, Anna had grabbed the crash cart parked nearby and wheeled it into the bay. "I need a large-bore 1.5 catheter, a 14-gauge, she said to the empty air, her hands already flying over the cart's drawers, finding what she needed with practiced speed. "What in God's name are you doing?" Thorne sputtered, rushing into the bay behind her. "He's an overdose. You're going to get yourself sued. Stop this right now." Anna ignored him. She ripped open an alcohol wipe and swabbed a very specific spot on the man's chest. The second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. The classic site for needle decompression. "Hayes, I am your superior. I am ordering you to stand down," Thorne shouted, his face turning a blotchy red. He reached out to grab her shoulder. In a movement so fast it was almost a blur, Anna shifted her weight, intercepting his hand, her fingers wrapping around his wrist. Her grip was like steel. She didn't look at him, her eyes still locked on her patient. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice dropping an octave into a tone of absolute command. Thorne froze, shocked as much by the strength in her grip as by the undisguised threat in her voice. He tried to pull his wrist away and couldn't. This mousy, incompetent woman was holding him in place with effortless strength. Just then, the patient on the gurney began to thrash. It wasn't a conscious movement. It was the body's last, primal fight for air. His arms flailed, his head tossed from side to side. He was a soldier, a fighter to his very core, and his body was resisting even on the edge of death. One of his hands swung out, catching Anna's arm. His delirium-filled eyes fluttered open. He saw a figure leaning over him, a needle in her hand. His training screamed threat. He tried to push her away, a low groan escaping his lips. Anna looked down at him. She saw the soldier. She saw the warrior fighting a battle he couldn't see. She released Thorne's wrist, her full attention on the man. She leaned in close, her mouth next to his ear, shielding her words from the stunned onlookers who were beginning to gather at the door of the bay. She whispered 3 words, a phrase from a world away, a code known only to a select, elite few. "Angels on station." The effect was instantaneous and profound. The man's body went completely still. The frantic thrashing ceased. His eyes, which had been wild with panic, cleared for a single, lucid moment. They focused on her face. He saw her. He understood. A flicker of recognition, of trust, passed through them. Then his eyes rolled back, and he was still once more. He had surrendered his life into her hands. Anna didn't hesitate. With the man now pliant, she located the spot on his chest again. She held the long, thick needle like an extension of her own hand. With a firm, practiced motion, she plunged it into his chest, through skin and muscle, until she felt the distinct pop as it breached the pleural space. A loud hiss filled the silent bay. It was the sound of trapped air, pressurized and desperate, escaping the prison of his chest cavity. On the monitor, a miracle happened. The flat line resolved back into a rhythm, a slow, steady sinus beat. His oxygen saturation, which had been in the low 80s, began to climb. 85, 89, 92. Anna held the catheter in place, her expression calm, her breathing even. She had just pulled a man back from the dead. The silence in the room was broken by Dr. Thorne. His face was a mask of incandescent fury and utter humiliation. He had been proven wrong, publicly and spectacularly. He had been defied. He had been physically stopped. And it had all been done by the one person in his ER he considered less than worthless. "Security!" he roared, his voice cracking with rage. "Security! To Observation 6! Now!" 2 burly guards appeared at the doorway, looking uncertain. "This woman," Thorne shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Anna, "has performed an unauthorized, reckless procedure on a patient. She physically assaulted me. She is a danger to this hospital. I want her fired. I want her out of this building immediately. Anna calmly taped the catheter in place, securing it to the man's chest. Her work was done, for now. She looked up at Thorne, her eyes clear and cold. There was no fear in them, no apology. There was nothing but a vast, empty calm. "You're right," she said, her voice even. "You should fire me." She stood up, stripped off her gloves, and dropped them into the biohazard bin. She didn't look back at the patient she had just saved. She didn't look at the stunned faces of Chloe or Mark or Dr. Evans. She looked directly at the security guards. "I'll escort myself out," she said. She walked past Thorne, her head held high, and headed for the exit. He had won the battle he thought he was fighting. He had gotten rid of her. But as Anna pushed open the doors and walked out into the cold, drizzling rain, she knew she had won the only war that mattered. The man in Bay 6 was alive. The rain was cold, seeping through her thin scrubs almost instantly. Anna didn't notice. She walked down the concrete sidewalk, the sounds of the city a dull roar around her. She didn't have her purse, her keys, or her phone. They were all still in her locker. It didn't matter. She just walked, putting one foot in front of the other. She had broken her one rule. She had shown herself. After 5 years of careful, suffocating silence, she had let the soldier out. The consequences were immediate and absolute. Fired. Disgraced. Her quiet little life was over. A strange sense of relief washed over her, colder than the rain. Hiding was exhausting. She had walked maybe 3 blocks when the sound reached her. It was a sound that belonged to another life, a sound that vibrated deep in her bones. The rhythmic, percussive whop, whop, whop of heavy rotor blades, getting closer. It was too low, too loud to be a media chopper or a medical flight. It sounded like war. She looked up. People on the street were stopping, pointing at the sky. 2 sleek black helicopters, devoid of any markings, were descending with terrifying speed, not toward the hospital's helipad, but toward the 6-lane highway that ran in front of it. Cars screeched to a halt, horns blaring in a cacophony of confusion and panic. The helicopters didn't land. They hovered just 10 feet above the asphalt, their rotor wash kicking up a storm of debris and sending a hurricane-force wind through the street. Ropes unspooled from their open doors, and dark figures slid down with practiced ease. They were soldiers. Clad in black tactical gear, carrying short-barreled rifles, they moved with a chilling, silent professionalism. They formed a perimeter, shutting down the highway as if they owned it. From the lead helicopter, a final figure descended. He was older, wearing a flight suit, and carried no weapon, but he moved with an aura of absolute authority that made the armed men around him seem like servants. He strode from the highway toward the ER entrance, his team parting for him like the Red Sea. Back inside the ER, chaos had erupted. Staff and patients crowded the windows, staring at the military invasion happening outside. Dr. Thorne was on the phone, presumably with hospital administration or the police, his voice high and strained. The glass doors of the ER slid open, and the man in the flight suit entered. His team flanked the entrance, their presence sucking all the air out of the room. The normal hospital panic was replaced by a new, more profound kind of fear. The fear of the unknown. The man's eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the room. He ignored the frantic hospital staff. He ignored Thorne, who was babbling something about unauthorized access. His gaze was searching, focused. "My name is General Jameson," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it commanded the attention of every single person in the room. "I am here for a member of my command, a man you have listed as John Doe, and I am here for the person who saved his life." He looked at Thorne, his eyes narrowing. "I was told there was a nurse, a woman who performed a needle thoracostomy against orders. Where is she?" Thorne's face went pale. "General, there's been a misunderstanding. That nurse was a reckless, insubordinate employee. She was terminated. She's no longer here." Jameson's expression turned to ice. "You fired the one person in this building who knew what they were doing?" He took a step closer to Thorne. "That man you left to die in a hallway is Master Sergeant Alex Ryder, a decorated hero of the United States Special Operations Command. And the procedure that reckless nurse performed is the only reason he is not currently on a slab in your morgue. He turned to one of his soldiers. Find her. Her name is Anna Hayes. Check the hospital's employee file. Get a photograph. I want every man on the street. Find my angel. The soldier nodded. Sir. Meanwhile, Anna had turned a corner, away from the spectacle. A black SUV with tinted windows screeched to a halt beside her. The passenger door opened. A young soldier in combat gear leaned out. Nurse Hayes? He asked, his voice respectful. Anna froze. They had found her. Ma'am, General Jameson sent us. He said to tell you that you're safe now. Please, get in the vehicle. Numbly, she complied. She slid into the back seat. The interior was clean and smelled of leather and ozone. The soldier handed her a thick, fleece-lined tactical jacket. The general thought you might be cold, ma'am. She pulled it on. It was warm and dry. The soldier got back in the front seat, and the SUV sped off, making a smooth U-turn and heading back toward the hospital. They drove past the lines of stopped cars, up onto the sidewalk, and parked directly in front of the ER entrance. The soldier opened her door. The general is waiting for you, ma'am. Anna stepped out of the SUV. She walked toward the doors of her old life, but this time she was not alone. She was not a victim. She entered the ER, flanked by two of Jameson's men. The room fell silent. Everyone stared. They saw the mousy, clumsy Nurse Hayes, the one who was fired in disgrace less than 30 minutes ago. But now she was wrapped in a military jacket, surrounded by elite soldiers, her face serene and composed. Dr. Thorne was in the middle of a frantic, self-serving explanation to a bewildered hospital administrator. A complete breakdown of protocol. She was unstable. I had no choice. He trailed off as he saw her. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. General Jameson turned, and a look of immense relief washed over his face. He walked toward her, his boots making no sound. Colonel, he said, his voice soft with respect. Anna gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. General. The use of her old rank, a rank no one in this building could possibly comprehend, hung in the air. Colonel. Not nurse. Colonel. Jameson turned to face Thorne and the administrator, his arm protectively gesturing toward Anna. This is Colonel Anna Hayes, he announced, his voice ringing with authority. For 5 years, she was one of the most decorated combat medics in the Air Force Pararescue. She has more saves in battlefield conditions than any 10 of your surgeons combined. The reckless procedure she performed is one she has taught to Green Berets and Delta Force operators. She didn't break protocol, Doctor. She wrote the protocol. He took a step toward Thorne, who seemed to shrink before him. You had a national hero dying in your hallway, and you were too arrogant and too ignorant to see it. You fired the one person on this continent who had the specific training to recognize both a tension pneumothorax and the signs of VX series nerve agent poisoning. A collective gasp went through the room. Nerve agent. Jameson's face was granite. Dr. Thorne, as of this moment, you are officially relieved of all medical authority regarding Master Sergeant Ryder. Colonel Hayes is in command of his care. This hospital and its resources are now at her disposal. You will provide her with anything she asks for, without question and without delay. If you obstruct her in any way, I will have you arrested for interfering with a matter of critical national security. Do I make myself clear? Thorne could only nod, his face ashen, his empire of arrogance crumbling to dust around him. Chloe was staring at Anna, her mouth wide open in awe. Dr. Evans looked ashamed. Mark, the sycophant, was trying to make himself invisible. Anna walked past them all, her focus singular. She headed for Bay 6, Jameson at her side. What's his status, General? She asked, her voice all business. He's alive, thanks to you, Jameson said, but the toxin is still in his system. We don't have an effective countermeasure for this variant. It's experimental. Alex, Master Sergeant Ryder, was tracking the cell that manufactured it. He got made. They entered the bay. Alex Ryder lay on the gurney, his vitals stable for now, but the pallor of his skin spoke to the war still raging inside his body. Anna picked up his chart. His lactate is high. He's still in shock. The chemical agent is likely causing systemic vasodilation and myocardial depression. Her mind was a supercomputer, processing data, formulating a plan. We need to get him to a real ICU, but we can't risk moving him far. We need to secure this wing of the hospital. Done, Jameson said, speaking into his radio. Lock it down. Anna began her own examination, her hands moving with a confidence that was breathtaking to watch. She was no longer hiding. She was home. The men who did this to him, she said, not looking up from her work. They know he survived the initial attack? They will, Jameson replied grimly. They'll have watchers. They'll have sources. They'll want to finish the job. Alex has something they want. Information. The location of their lab and their primary buyer. As if on cue, a muted thump echoed from down the hall, followed by a muffled shout. One of Jameson's soldiers, posted at the entrance to the now secured corridor, had been neutralized. Anna's head snapped up. Her eyes weren't the eyes of a nurse anymore. They were the eyes of a soldier scanning for threats. They're here, she said, her voice a low whisper. Just then, the door to the fire stairs at the end of the hall burst open. But it wasn't a team of assassins. It was Dr. Thorne, his face a mask of panic. They're coming! I saw them on the security monitor! Men with guns! He was babbling, terrified. Anna looked at him, then at Jameson. He's not just scared, General. He's guilty. Her mind made the leap in an instant. How would the enemy know which hospital, which floor, which patient? They needed a source on the inside. Someone with authority. Someone whose arrogance and greed could be exploited. Jameson seemed to arrive at the same conclusion. He grabbed Thorne by the front of his expensive scrubs. You made a call, didn't you, Doctor? You sold him out. Thorne began to blubber, his composure shattered. They had my financials, my gambling debts. I thought he was just some junkie. I just wanted them to take him away. Before Jameson could respond, the sound of silenced gunfire erupted from the main ER area. The hit squad wasn't being subtle anymore. We're compromised, Anna stated flatly. She looked at Alex, still unconscious on the gurney. We have to move him. Now! Where can we go? Jameson demanded, shoving Thorne into the hands of two of his soldiers. The whole city is a kill box. Anna's mind raced. They needed a place that was secure, isolated, and had at least rudimentary facilities for medical care. A place no one would think to look. A place off the grid. I know a place, she said. My cabin. It's an hour north of here. It's remote. Defensible. It was the place she had bought to disappear. The place she ran to when the nightmares got too bad. It was stocked for a long siege, both medically and otherwise. How do we get there? Service elevator to the sub-level loading dock. There's an ambulance a friend of mine keeps parked there for emergencies, she said, already starting to disconnect Alex's monitors and attach a portable unit. Let's go. We have a 10-minute window before they figure out where we went. The escape was a blur of controlled chaos. Jameson's men formed a moving perimeter around the gurney, their weapons raised. Anna pushed the gurney herself, her movements fluid and efficient, never jostling the critically ill man in her care. They moved through the labyrinthine basement of the hospital, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant and damp concrete. They burst out onto a deserted loading dock. An old, slightly beat-up private ambulance was parked in a dark corner. Chloe, the young nurse, stood beside it, her face pale with fear, but her eyes resolute. She had the keys in her hand. You called me, Chloe said to Anna, her voice trembling slightly. I came. Thank you, Chloe. You're a good soldier, Anna said, giving her a quick, firm nod. Now get back inside and lock the doors. Tell no one you saw us. They loaded Alex into the back of the ambulance. Anna and two of Jameson's best men, soldiers named Diaz and Evans, jumped in with him. Jameson got in the front passenger seat. Drive, he commanded the soldier behind the wheel. The ambulance peeled out of the loading dock, its sirens silent, and merged into the city traffic. As they pulled away, they could hear the distant sound of sirens converging on the hospital, a response to the firefight that had erupted in their wake. They had escaped the trap. But now they were alone, driving into the night with a dying man and an enemy that would stop at nothing to find them. The cabin was exactly as Anna had left it, a dark shape against a darker forest, miles down a winding, unpaved road. It was small, made of rough-hewn logs, with a wide porch and few windows. To any passerby, it looked like a simple hunter's retreat. But the logs were reinforced with steel, the windows were shatterproof polycarbonate, and the basement was a concrete bunker stocked with enough medical supplies, food, and ammunition to withstand a lengthy siege. It was Anna's fortress of solitude, built for a war she hoped she would never have to fight. They carried Alex inside, his gurney seeming monstrously out of place in the rustic living room. Diaz and Evans immediately began a sweep of the property, checking the perimeter and setting up tactical positions. General Jameson established a communications link in the basement, a satellite uplink that was Anna's one concession to the outside world. Anna's focus was singular: Alex. She converted the main bedroom into a makeshift ICU. The cabin had a powerful generator, and she soon had her own portable monitors and equipment running, their clinical beeps a strange counterpoint to the chirping of crickets outside. Alex's condition was deteriorating. The toxin was winning. His blood pressure was stubbornly low despite fluids and pressors. His temperature was climbing. "The agent has a secondary pyrogenic effect," she explained to Jameson, who had come to watch, his face etched with worry. "It's designed to mimic sepsis, to throw off the diagnosis. It's burning him up from the inside." "What can we do?" Jameson asked. "We can support his systems, keep him oxygenated, keep his blood pressure up. But unless we can neutralize the toxin, we're just delaying the inevitable," she said, her voice grim. She was packing his body in ice packs, trying to bring the fever down. "The intel he has. The data chip. Where is it?" "Embedded in his left forearm," Jameson said. "Subdermal. We need a reader to access it, and the only one is back at base." Anna looked at Alex's arm. "We don't have time to get him to a base. We have to get it out, now. The information on that chip is the only real antidote we have. If we can find the lab, we can find their research. We can find a counteragent." She began assembling a sterile surgical kit from her supplies. "I'm going to have to cut it out. Here." "Can you do that?" Anna looked up at him, her eyes flashing in the lamplight. "I've done field surgery in the back of a shaking helicopter with RPGs flying past my head, General. Yes, I can do this." The procedure was delicate. The chip was tiny, nestled among nerves and blood vessels. Anna worked with the steady hands of a master watchmaker, her focus absolute. Outside, the night was quiet. Too quiet. She had just located the chip, a tiny sliver of black ceramic against the tissue, when Diaz's voice crackled over the small radio she'd clipped to her shirt. "Colonel, we have movement. 2 vehicles, no headlights, approaching from the main road. They're about to click out." "They found us," Jameson swore, grabbing his rifle. "Thorne must have had a tracker on him. Or they tracked the ambulance." "How many?" Anna asked, her voice calm as she continued to work. "Can't tell. At least half a dozen bogies, probably more," Diaz reported. "They're professionals, spreading out, using the terrain." "Buy me time," Anna said. "I'm almost there." She carefully lifted the chip from its place, her forceps precise. She dropped it into a sterile specimen cup just as the first gunshot cracked through the night air, shattering the piece. The siege had begun. The next hour was a descent into hell. The cabin, designed to be defensible, became a bastion under fire. Bullets thudded into the reinforced logs, sounding like angry hornets. The polycarbonate windows held, but spiderweb cracks began to appear. Diaz and Evans, the 2 Delta operators, were magnificent, moving between windows, laying down disciplined bursts of fire, calling out enemy positions. Anna worked on, ignoring the chaos. She closed the incision on Alex's arm, her stitches neat and even. Then she turned her attention back to his vitals. He was crashing again. The stress of the firefight, the vibrations, the noise, it was all pushing his fragile system over the edge. "I'm losing him!" she yelled over the din of gunfire. His heart was in a dangerous arrhythmia. She grabbed the defibrillator paddles. "Charging to 200! Clear!" She shocked him. His body arched. The rhythm on the monitor stuttered, then returned to a weak but steady beat. A bullet punched through the wall just inches from her head, showering her with splinters. She didn't even flinch. "Evans is hit!" Diaz shouted from the living room. Anna grabbed a trauma bag. "Cover me!" she yelled. She low-crawled from the bedroom into the main room. Evans was down, a dark stain spreading across his leg. Diaz was providing covering fire, his rifle barking. Jameson was by another window, firing his sidearm. Anna reached Evans and immediately went to work, her hands a blur as she cut away his pant leg. "Femoral artery is nicked," she diagnosed instantly. "I need to clamp it." She applied a tourniquet high on his thigh, twisting it tight until the bleeding slowed. The cabin was a war zone, and she was the combat medic once more. This was her element. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the back of the cabin as the reinforced kitchen door was breached with a battering ram. "They're in!" Diaz yelled, turning to face the new threat. A figure clad in black, face obscured by a balaclava, stepped into the kitchen, rifle raised. He was moving toward the bedroom, toward Alex. Diaz was pinned down. Jameson was out of position. No one could stop him. Except for Anna. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think. She acted. She grabbed the heavy steel surgical tray next to her and hurled it at the intruder's head with all her might. It struck him in the temple with a sickening crunch. He staggered, disoriented for a critical second. It was all the time she needed. She surged to her feet and launched herself at him. This wasn't a nurse's clumsy tackle. It was a calculated, brutal assault. She drove her shoulder into his center of mass, her legs pumping. The force of her attack sent them both crashing backward into the kitchen. The intruder's rifle clattered to the floor. He was bigger and stronger, but she was faster and more skilled. He tried to grapple with her, to bring his weight to bear. She moved like smoke, evading his grasp, her hands striking at his throat, his eyes, the vulnerable points she had been trained to attack. He threw a punch. She deflected it, capturing his arm, twisting it behind his back in a lock that brought a scream of pain from his lips. With a final, explosive twist, she dislocated his shoulder and sent him sprawling to the floor, incapacitated. She stood over him, breathing heavily, her knuckles bruised, her eyes blazing with a warrior's light. Just then, Alex Ryder's eyes fluttered open. He was weak, delirious, but he was conscious. And he saw her. He saw this quiet, gentle nurse standing victorious over a defeated enemy commando. He saw the angel of mercy was also an angel of wrath. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips before he slipped back into unconsciousness. The tide of the battle turned. The breach was contained. But they were still outnumbered, their ammunition running low. Diaz was trying to hold the front while Anna treated Evans's leg. It was a losing fight. "Colonel," Jameson said, his voice grim as he reloaded his last magazine. "It's been an honor serving with you again." Just as despair began to set in, a new sound joined the firefight. The unmistakable, thunderous roar of helicopter gunships. Not the stealthy black helicopters from before, but two Apache attack helicopters, bristling with rockets and cannons. They swept in over the treetops like vengeful gods. The night erupted in fire and thunder as the Apache's chain guns opened up, tearing the forest apart, ripping into the enemy positions with terrifying force. The enemy's return fire, once a confident staccato, became a panicked, sporadic pop, and then fell silent altogether. Ground troops, pouring from Chinooks that landed in the clearing, swarmed the area, securing the perimeter and rounding up the few surviving mercenaries. General Jameson lowered his weapon, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. "The cavalry's here," he said. He had gotten the data chip to his comms team in the basement. They had decrypted it and sent the coordinates. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Medics swarmed into the cabin, taking over the care of Evans and Alex, preparing them for immediate evacuation. Anna stepped back, the adrenaline finally beginning to fade, leaving a deep, bone-weary exhaustion in its place. She had done it. She had held the line. The next morning, the sun rose on a world transformed. Alex Ryder and the wounded soldier Evans had been airlifted to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. The data from the chip had led to simultaneous raids on a dozen locations across the country, dismantling the entire terrorist network and capturing the rogue chemist who had designed the toxin. An experimental counteragent, found in the main lab, was already being synthesized. Alex was going to make a full recovery. Anna was flown back to the city, but she didn't go to her empty apartment. She went to Metropolitan General. A press conference was in full swing in the hospital lobby. The place was packed with reporters, cameras, and hospital staff. On a hastily erected podium stood Dr. Marcus Thorne, flanked by the hospital administrator and a team of lawyers. He was spinning his tale, painting himself as a victim, a hero who had uncovered a conspiracy. "And in the midst of this unprecedented crisis," Thorne said, his voice resonating with false sincerity, "we were forced to deal with an unstable and dangerously incompetent nurse, a woman named Anna Hayes, whose reckless actions endangered a patient and complicated our efforts to secure the facility. We believe she may have been in league with these criminals." It was at that exact moment that the main doors of the lobby opened. General Jameson walked in, dressed in his full Class A uniform, his chest a rainbow of ribbons and medals. On one side of him was a recovering Master Sergeant, Alex Ryder, in a wheelchair but looking sharp and resolute in his own uniform. On the other side was Anna. She wasn't in scrubs or a tactical jacket. She was wearing the immaculate blue service dress uniform of a colonel in the United States Air Force. Her own medals, including the Air Force Cross, the second highest award for valor, gleamed under the bright lights. The entire lobby fell silent. The reporters turned as one, their cameras swiveling. Thorne stopped mid-sentence, his jaw dropping. He stared at Anna as if he were seeing a ghost. The mousy, clumsy nurse was gone. In her place was a figure of immense authority and dignity. Jameson strode to the podium, his expression unreadable. He didn't ask for the microphone. He simply took it from Thorne's limp hand. "My name is General Thomas Jameson, of the United States Special Operations Command," he began, his voice booming through the lobby. "You've just been listening to a man, Dr. Marcus Thorne, tell a story. Now I'm going to tell you the truth." For the next 10 minutes, Jameson laid out the facts with cold, brutal precision. He detailed Alex Ryder's mission, the ambush, and his arrival at the ER. He described how Dr. Thorne's arrogant misdiagnosis almost cost a national hero his life. "The unstable nurse he spoke of," Jameson said, turning to gesture to Anna, "is Colonel Anna Hayes, one of this nation's most decorated combat medics. She didn't endanger Master Sergeant Ryder. She saved him. She diagnosed him correctly when your chief of medicine failed. She defied an ignorant order to save his life." He then held up a small audio player. But Dr. Thorne's failure wasn't just a matter of incompetence. It was a matter of treason. He pressed play. Thorne's panicked, wheezing voice filled the room. The recording of his call to the mercenaries, captured from the phone of a captured hitman. "He's at Metropolitan General. I'll give you the room number. Just make it look like he succumbed to the overdose. No one will question it." A wave of shock and disgust rolled through the crowd. Thorne's face collapsed. He was exposed, utterly and completely. "Dr. Marcus Thorne," Jameson said, his voice like cracking ice. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, and for giving aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States of America." As two military policemen stepped forward to apprehend him, Thorne finally broke. "No, it's a lie. She set me up. That woman, she's the monster," he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Anna. He was a raving, pathetic creature, his power and prestige stripped away in an instant. The MPS cuffed him, his cries of innocence echoing through the silent lobby as they dragged him away. The hospital administrator, looking horrified, rushed to the microphone. "On behalf of Metropolitan General, I offer our deepest apologies. Colonel Hayes, your job is, of course, reinstated. We would be honored to have you, perhaps as head of nursing." Anna stepped forward. She looked out at the crowd, at the faces of her former colleagues. She saw Chloe, tears of pride streaming down her face. She saw Dr. Evans, who met her gaze and gave a slow, respectful nod of apology. "Thank you for the offer," Anna said, her voice clear and strong, "but I must respectfully decline." General Jameson put a hand on her shoulder. "That's because Colonel Hayes already has a job. Her resignation from the Air Force 5 years ago was premature. I have taken the liberty of reactivating her commission, effective immediately. She will be taking command of a newly formed Joint Service Special Operations Medical Rapid Response Unit. Her first official duty will be to oversee the complete recovery and retraining of her first patient." He smiled at Alex Ryder, who grinned back. The lobby erupted in thunderous applause. The reporters were shouting questions, their cameras flashing like lightning. Anna simply stood there, letting the wave of vindication wash over her. The years of hiding, of being small, of carrying the weight of her past. It was all over. Later, after the chaos had subsided, Anna stood in a quiet hallway, looking out a window at the city. She subconsciously touched the scar on her forearm. It no longer felt like a brand of shame, but a badge of honor. A quiet whirring sound made her turn. Alex had wheeled himself up beside her. He was still weak, but his eyes were clear and full of a profound respect. "Colonel Hayes," he said formally, Master Sergeant Ryder, she replied, a small smile touching her lips. They were quiet for a moment. That thing you said, Alex began, his voice softer. Back in the ER, when I was checking out. Angels on station? She finished for him. Yeah, that, he said. For a second there, I thought I was already dead, and you were the welcoming committee. Anna's smile widened. Not yet, Sergeant. You and I still have work to do. He looked at her, his gaze intense. The general said your new unit needs a senior NCO, someone with experience in getting into and out of trouble. I might be able to make a recommendation, Anna said. He held out his hand. She took it. His grip was firm, a promise of the strength that was returning. It's good to have you back, Colonel, he said. It's good to be back, she replied, and for the first time in 5 years, she truly meant it. She was no longer hiding from the world. She was stepping back into it, ready to face whatever came next, not as a ghost, but as a soldier. An angel, on station, and ready for duty. She walked with him down the corridor, away from her old life, and toward the horizon of her new one, the quiet, mousy nurse finally and forever laid to rest. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content, and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. The story of Colonel Anna Hayes is a powerful reminder that true strength and character are not defined by titles or the opinions of arrogant people. It teaches us to never judge a book by its cover, as the quietest person in the room might just be the most capable. Anna's journey shows that doing the right thing, even when it's hard and comes at great personal cost, always pays off in the end. Her courage to defy a corrupt authority to save a life led to her ultimate vindication and allowed her to reclaim the heroic identity she had hidden away. It reminds us that integrity is a choice we make every day. What would you have done if you were in Anna's shoes? Would you have risked your entire career to save a stranger against a powerful boss's orders? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support helps us continue to bring you these inspiring stories. Have a nice rest of your day.